Hi, and welcome to Caterpillar Cross Stitch. My name is Ford, and this week I'm going to be talking to you about a technique called railroading. What is it? How is it done? Why? And why is it called that? Make sure you stick to the end because I'm also going to help you answer the big question, is it worth it? Now, before we steam on into talking about railroading, take just a moment right now and subscribe to the channel, like this video, and at the end, leave me a comment. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, leave that in the comments as well. Those things really help me out, and they don't cost you anything other than a few seconds of work, so I'd really appreciate it if you would. So what is railroading? Simply put, railroading is a technique that you can use while stitching to help make sure that the strands of each stitch lay parallel to one another in order to give you a more tidy finished stitch. It also helps even out tension and reduce the twisting on your thread, and in my experience, it reduces the frequency with which you experience knots and tangles. So in addition to the advantages that it creates while stitching, it does also give you a little bit better coverage with the stitches when you're done, so you'll see less of the fabric showing through. It's a great way to get more coverage on a project without having to increase the number of strands, which is especially important if, say, you're working from a kit, or if, like me, you don't really like the additional bulk that the additional strands add to the stitch. You want it to cover the fabric better, but you don't want the stitch to be a little hobnail. So let's go over how it's done. Now, I've already started my thread using the loop start from the front method here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay my thread over towards where I'm going to be stitching to. And then with my needle, I'm just going to split those two strands before I go back down through the surface. Can you see how my thread is kind of splitting those two strands? Now, I don't want to pierce either of those strands or I'll create a terrible tangle, but as I pull it back down through, you can see that that keeps those two strands separated, so that right up until the moment that I cinch them down to the surface of the fabric, those strands are separated by the other end of themselves. And so then I just do that each time with each stitch. Take my needle, split the two strands that I'm using, and then pull my whole thread through. And you can see that my thread will do all the work there of keeping those strands separated right up until the moment that they come in contact with the surface. Now, there are also specialized tools that you can use for this that are called laying tools, but you kind of need both hands to do that. An advantage of doing it this way is that you can do this with one hand. So if you are also holding your project with your other hand, then this method of railroading doesn't require any specialized equipment and doesn't require you to be using a stand. And it takes a little bit of getting used to do this. But it doesn't really take a lot of extra time once you get accustomed to it. It's gotten for me to where it's basically second nature to split those threads with each one. If you go back and watch some of my videos where I do time-lapse stitching and stuff, you'll probably notice me doing it. And I'm not doing it consciously there, it's just something that happens now when I stitch because it provides a little bit of a neatness benefit. Some people think you only need to do this on the top half of each individual stitch, but personally I like the maximum benefit that comes from doing both stitches. Now, as I get a little bit farther into the thread and it starts getting a little more twisted, it becomes harder and harder to separate those. So then eventually I will just untwist my thread to make it a little bit easier. The other nice thing about doing this is that in addition to its own natural benefits, it kind of forces you to notice when your thread is starting to get twisted. So that will help me just be neater overall because it points out to me when my thread is starting to. And don't forget to go sign up for the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Stitch Club email newsletter. You'll get advance notice of any upcoming projects, retreats, stitch-alongs, and that kind of thing. You'll also get a free download of 1, our top 10 cross-stitching tips, and 2, 9 free digital PDF cross-stitch patterns. That includes a year-long tracking pattern that you can use to track the weather or moods or whatever you like. So make sure you hit the link down there in the description so you don't miss out on that. So that still leaves the question, why is it called railroading? And it's really just as simple as the fact that the two strands laying side by side on the surface of the fabric are parallel, like the straight lines of a railroad track. Now, personally, the first thing that I thought of when somebody used this term with me was railroad tracks, which was the bane of my existence back when my wife was in the Navy and I had to iron her uniforms. If you missed and got the crease in the wrong spot, you'd get railroad tracks, and you pretty much throw it in the washer and start over because there's no ironing those back out. And it's kind of a similar thing here too. We're getting those two straight parallel lines for each stitch, like railroad tracks. So we're railroading those stitches. And you can use this method, or you can use something called a laying tool to achieve that effect. You know, there's a really amazing community around the Caterpillar Cross Stitch brand. Easiest way to find that is to follow the Instagram or join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Facebook group. There are tens of thousands of stitchers in those spaces with hundreds of thousands of years of cumulative experience. So it's an amazing resource that's available to you. If you're not taking advantage of it, you're really missing out. So that really only leaves the question, is it worth it? Does it make a big enough difference to change your workflow and your process and to be slowed down a little bit? And I'll leave that up to you, but this is the point where I get to drag out my Julia Child impression and go, here's one I did earlier. And so we're going to take a look here. I've got 2 squares of 8 stitches by 8 stitches using 2 strands of DMC 310 black on 14 count Aida. Black is the one that I used because it is notoriously a reedy color. It has pretty thin strands to it and it gives you the worst coverage. So if there's a flaw in your technique, black 310 is the one that's going to make that show the most. So here I've got 8 by 8 stitches that I did without railroading. And then over here I've got 8 by 8 stitches that I did using the railroading technique that I just showed you. No special tools or any other special measures. And you can see that it's not perfect, but that the coverage is considerably better on the side that I railroaded than it is on the side that I didn't railroad. So less of the fabric is shown. And again, if this is something that matters to you, then it's something that doesn't cost you anything extra, and once you get used to it, doesn't really even create any extra work for you, but will give you a slightly more neat result. So if that's part of the joy of the craft for you, of pursuing the neatest possible finish that you can create, then this is a really nice thing to have in your toolkit. If that doesn't matter to you, if this looks fine to you, and honestly for a lot of projects, I want some of those bits of fabric showing through. I want you to see the little individual X's, especially if I'm going for a really rustic finish. So whether or not I use it depends on the project and the fabric and the color that I'm using. But this is a pretty marked difference for me, so when I really do want that good coverage and neatness, I'll usually take the extra steps to railroad. But as to whether or not it's worth it to you, that's for you to decide. So what do you think? Do you already railroad? Are you going to start railroading? Is it worth it? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. I read every comment that you post. So I do want to thank you so much for watching. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next time.